Thanks for joining me back in my epic park. This is Vivaland, where I'm trying to build a super realistic park in Rollercoaster Tycoon Classic, including realistic park operating methods, namely charging for park entry rather than per ride, which in Rollercoaster Tycoon makes earning revenue that bit more difficult. My idea today is to add a haunted valley which opens out into a woodland clearing which will be the home of a spooky fairground. So here is where I am at. At the entrance, guests are welcomed by gardens and water features and a small number of rides. We then have themed areas starting on the current right edge with the Roman area, then there is a junior garden wonderland, the mine area, and finally the Wild West, which I built last time. Now over in the Roman area I have an issue with the mini golf, as players don't seem to be able to get off the ride. There's 20 guests on the golf but I can't see them. It looks like they are all stuck in the same spot, so let's close the ride and reopen it just to see if we can solve that issue. So before I tackled that little issue, I was catching you up on what's already in the park, and the one major element we didn't see is the wooden coaster, which is the first marquee ride guests come across when they arrive at the park. In front of it is the first monorail station, which I've put in place to avoid me making the mistake of not leaving enough space for the transport rides, which guests will need to get around this huge park. As you can see, the park is pretty condensed at the front, but there is a lot of land still left to build in. After the last episode, I did ask for your tips, and I'd noted how tightly everything is packed together. Mickman pointed out that everything is also quite rectangular, whereas in real parks, themed areas tend to be a little less square. With that in mind, and the worry that I'll use all of my theming without much space to expand those areas and with lots of land left in the park, today I'm going to build two linked areas. I'm going to use the spooky theming first to create a haunted woodland, and then an area it will open out to, which I've got an idea for. The concept is one of those travelling fairs which might come to town for a week or two in the summer, but this will also have an element of creepy about it too, kind of like Stranger Things. I'm going to build it beyond the Wild West area, but first thing to do is to remove the path that already exists, as I want something a little less straight and a lot more woodlandy. So I'll start with the new path, which will take an indirect route back almost to where the original path would have been. This will become my woodland walk, where the path ends will be the opening for the fun fair, which will hopefully almost feel like a clearance in the woods. Along the woodland we'll have a haunted house, so I'll get that in now to build scenery around it. I only have one information kiosk in the park, so I'll add another here along with toilet. Now for the scenery, I'm going to scatter lots of trees just randomly until the area has become very woodlandy. This took me a few minutes, so I'm speeding through this bit. With that done, I want guests to have the sense that as they walk through this totally normal woodland, they hit upon a few strange or creepy things along the way. So I'm adding some dead trees and gravestones around the area of the haunted house to truly give it a sense of this haunted house in the woods. With that done, I want to add a few more trees to really conceal this area, and then from Wacky Worlds I have the B-movie giant spider, and what's weirder and creepier in the woods than a giant spider? I'm kind of thinking Aragog in Harry Potter vibes here. Time to build that fairground area then. First up, I'm going for a ghost ride, because that fits both themes. It's scary-ish, and you definitely see something like this at a travelling fair. I'm using the pre-built ride because it ticks all the boxes, and I find building something with that many walls to be incredibly fiddly. Next up, the fairground coaster. I don't want something too big or intense, it has to be packed up to travel to the next town, right? So Virginia wheel fits the bill and has that old style vibe about it. We don't want this to be too high or the spinning cars will send my guests into nausea overdrive. So just up to 8 units above the ground will do, and we'll drop down in increments, turning plenty of times to keep that car spinning. I'll also bring it back under the station and to the edge of the ride. Again, I'm thinking fairground style with a tightly packed ride and guests walking nearby being able to see the cars speed along the tracks. So with construction complete, I'll add a couple of theming elements, just a sign for the ride and some log cabin theming. You've definitely seen this ride at your local fair, I think. Entrance and exit paths in place, and this fair is going to need some more rides. I'll lay the path first and then add a hall of mirrors, space rings, magic carpet, I'd have gone for a twist but I already have one in the park, a top spin, crooked house and dodgems. All fairground style rides I think. And of course, any good fairground needs some stalls. Balloons, fried chicken, fizzy drinks and candy floss seems very fun fair to me. I'll add a souvenir stall too. To complete the fairground, I'll add a 3D cinema in the corner. Then, to complete the theming, some spooky schools to welcome guests to the fairground on both sides, and some more dead trees and graveyard monuments to just scatter around this haunted fair. I'm shifting the cinema back slightly to make way for some path because I can see an issue I'm about to have. First though, let's test ride that Virginia wheel. I'm content with those stats. I prefer excitement to be the highest of the three, but they're all pretty close and there is no getting away from high nausea with a Virginia wheel. So let's get all these new rides open. I also quickly added some trash cans, benches and some lamps to add to the theme, and I can now connect this area to the main park. I'll also need an extra mechanic and some handymen to patrol this area. So here's that problem I mentioned I'd spotted earlier. In Rollercoaster Tycoon, guests head in the direction of rides they want to go on, especially newly opened rides. But the way I've built this, the path doesn't take a very direct route to my fairground area. So I have a lot of guests getting close to the Virginia wheel and then not able to find a path through to it. And you can now see how crowded it is getting down near the Ferris wheel. So, despite all my efforts of creating a haunted woodland walkway which guests come through to reveal the fairground opening, I'm going to need a path to shortcut from behind the Ferris wheel. And here they all come. So there is my fairground area. It will hopefully feel like even more of an opening in the woods once I've built other areas around it. You can see it takes up more space than any other area of my park and hopefully is somewhat more realistic too. But it is in the way of my monorail, so I will reshape that slightly and get the second station in place beyond the fairground. I spent a fair chunk of money on that new area and all the trees to go with it, so I'll need to play through a few months and earn more revenue before I really start building again. This gives me a chance to check on my existing rides, their popularity, any issues we may have, and the pricing of the items in my shops and stalls, and of course the entrance fee. The new area is seeming very popular, which is great, and my guest count is on the way up. So let's check on the mini golf after that issue from earlier, and sure enough it is still happening. It seems this hole D from the build menu, is taking guests too long to complete and causing a backlog, so I'm just going to remove it. There isn't room without major reconstruction to swap for another hole, so I'll just replace it with path. With lots of new rides, I can increase my entry fee. I know guests are arriving with between £90 and £120 in their pocket, so setting £60 as the entry fee allows them to still have cash in their pocket to spend while inside the park. I've paid back some more of that loan now, although I'm still spending a lot on interest each month, so I'd like to get it down some more before I build again. I've got my eye on this area near the woodland for a major new coaster, maybe a steel coaster or stand-up coaster. I've got plenty to pick from and I want this next one to be a big one. I'll buy myself some thinking time on that though and save it for next time. Thanks for watching, and as always, please share any tips or suggestions in the comments, and if you want to see more from my channel, I'd be very grateful if you could hit subscribe.